Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of the CXO show. My name is Swapnil Kamat. I am the CEO of upGrad for Business. As you all know, this is the favorite time of my week where I get to interact and converse with some of India's most successful professionals. And as I say every week, we have most of these professionals come from the HR and learning and development fraternity. Because what else would we do as a skilling and education company ourselves, right? We have to call people that are in the realm of our trade. And today I have one such person, Aparna Kaul. Aparna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Swapnil, and thanks for calling you can say people that you converse with interesting and successful. I hope I live up to that. But let's see how it goes. I'm very excited to be in a conversation with you.
Yes, the thing is, I just realized, Aparna, and I'm sure so will you, is we're so busy, especially when you live in an Indian city, we're so busy with all our conversations are so structured, right? So from the start of the day till the end of the day, almost every conversation is a structured conversation. And as a matter of fact, we take that same thing home so often, where even at home, there are so many literally housekeeping issues that we have that we need to discuss with a partner or spouse or with an in-law, sometimes with our kids. So there's never a space for just an open-ended conversation that could just about go anywhere and in any direction, right? So this is one of those conversations like that broadly, of course, talks about careers, talks about HR, talks about stuff like that, but with no real box laid out for it, right? So let's enjoy the 1 hour that we have.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so before
Let's
I
do
get
it.
started, before I get started, like I do for all my guests, I'm going to do a quick introduction of Aparna. Aparna Kaul is a senior general manager, talent development at Sopra Steria, one of the leading tech companies. With a career spanning over 19 years, Aparna is a distinguished professional who holds a Bachelor of Engineering in Computer Science, showcasing her solid technical background, and has further enriched her expertise through an executive program in human resource management from IIM Calcutta. Aparna is a seasoned professional who has navigated diverse industries, leaving her imprint on organizations such as Delhi Metro Railway Corporation, Telecommunications Consultants India, Axway, and Sopra Steria. As the flag bearer for Sopra Steria's India's learning and development team, she has leveraged her technical and delivery expertise to forge a solid L&D team. Colleagues commend Aparna for her strong control and leadership, particularly in critical and stressful situations that have a significant impact on business. Described as a great orator, motivator, team player, Aparna combines initiative with her exceptional ability to anticipate behaviors. What a nice introduction I've given you, Aparna, haven't I?
Yes, I'm flattered, I'm honored, and thank you very much for that, Swapnil.
That's typically what I'm getting from all my guests. They're like, you know what, the introduction, whoever, and Mahin is putting these beautiful introductions together. Whoever is putting these introductions together, they're like, please call these people, or I'll call you for every of my new meetings or whatever I have. Please talk to the CEO and introduce me like that. That'll be of some benefit.
That's true. That's true. I'm from the same club. Whoever said this to you, please count me in the same queue. Thanks a lot for putting it together beautifully. And when somebody else reads it out that way, you kind of get a flashback, you get a deja vu.
Yeah.
Because, in 19, 20 years, there are a lot of things, a lot of decisions that you make with those
Yeah.
apprehensions that whether they'll pan out the way you think they should,
Yeah.
and then you get reminded of all of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Mahi needs to be thanked for that. So my first question, like it is for all my guests, is I want you to run me through a little of your background because it's already looking
Mm.
interesting to me. There seems to be a very interesting switch from engineering, which has happened with so
Yes.
many of my guests, and somehow a lot of our engineering friends have found their way into HR for some reason, and now are doing an amazing job. It's literally interview after interview or conversation after conversation on the CXO show. It's so similar, because I'm like, okay, here we go, another engineering.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, because maybe unfortunately I haven't come across many people who've made that switch.
Yeah.
Though in my company, my CHRO is also from technology background, and she was very instrumental in bringing me to HR. Because honestly speaking, I never planned it that way. I belong to a family of technocrats. Both my elder sisters are engineering graduates. They're doing very well in IT. My father worked in telecommunications all his life. So, even the classical saying which says that even before you decide what you have to do, you first complete your engineering. So somewhere that actually happened with me. In
Yeah.
fact, because I was so interested in, I participated in a lot of debates and all at school and college level. So my elder sister once did mention to me that, why don't you go in for an MBA? It will suit you better. And the
Yeah.
first thought that came to my mind was that probably she doesn't want me to join the engineers club. She's done it
Ah,
herself and doesn't want it for me. That typical sibling thing.
yeah. Yeah.
But then I think life had that plan for me. So
Yeah.
I started out as a senior system analyst in Delhi Metro Rail Corporation.
Yeah.
And I worked on the very first automatic fare collection module that was put in place, the smart card that you use on the metro trains.
Mm.
Those the development for those was done by the team that I was in, and then I moved to TCIL, another semi-government enterprise. And that's when in 2006 I decided to get into the private sector. And though it was something that my mother still holds against me, because she didn't want me to move from a, like they say, stable government job into private sector. But when you're young, you want to conquer the world, and I thought that probably I wasn't doing enough in the jobs that I was in. And
Mm.
that's where this opportunity of Sopra at that time came along. And
Got it.
I joined it in their IT team, and I worked in IT from 2006 to 2014.
Got it.
And in 2013, my current CHRO had joined, and she was looking for somebody to come and revamp the technical trainings bit. So
Got it.
I picked up HR as a 1 year project, that I'll come, I'll revamp the technical trainings bit, and then I'll probably go back and do some, technology work. But
Mm.
then, honestly speaking, Swapnil, when that 1 year became 2, 3, 4, 5, and also the work kept expanding. So with technical trainings, I got soft skills, process trainings, leadership development,
Yeah.
assessment centers, and that's how then in 2019 I thought that I should have some legitimacy in the profile that I have, because I didn't have any
Mm.
formal HR
Mm.
qualification.
Mm.
And that's when I decided to do my postgraduate diploma in HRM.
Mm.
Because sitting in 15, 20 people who are HR graduates from premier institutes, and here I am, I don't even know what Maslow's hierarchy is. So
Ha
I
ha.
thought that I need to get some theories, some concepts in place.
Mm.
That's what I did in 2019, 2020.
Mm.
Right now, I am leading learning and development for Pan India. I also run the International Learning Academy for 16 other English speaking countries of the group,
Great.
Sopra Steria group. And
Mm.
recently, about 2 years ago, I picked up an additional role of a talent partner for one of our delivery units, which is the
Got it.
BPS.
Got
So
it.
that's what that's what my professional journey has been. In summary, I would say I'm not an HR person by qualification, but I think I'm an HR person by choice and temperament.
Got it.
So, and that is something that works for me.
Got it. What a lovely, your the orator part of you being a lovely articulator of thoughts is quite. I like the way you navigated us through your journey so far. I have a lot of things to kind of like add here, right? I have, as I say, with a lot of my guests that come from this engineering and HR/L&D background, I find that always to be a very interesting combination, right? Because
Hmm.
it, I think, combines somewhere a logical analytical data problem solving training, because you've got a lot of that training in as an engineer. And if somebody has, like your sister pointed out, the natural capability of probably articulating yourself well, understanding people, understanding people's motivation, so on and so forth, right? If you have that training along with a lot of these natural traits, I think that makes for a lethal combination, and for somebody that really excels in HR roles. And you say you haven't come across a lot of people. Like literally every interview that I'm doing with an HR head or a L&D head, I'm seeing a combination of these
Wonderful.
backgrounds,
That's
right?
wonderful.
Yeah. And I also must add, Aparna, I think I don't mean to sound like a therapist or a psychologist or even an astrologer, but if I had to take a bet as to what got you to kind of stay put in this particular role, is you probably realize the impact that you are having on a much larger scale, right? Because in a lot of services industry, and especially in anything which is IT/technical in any way, you realize that upskilling, education, and development of our talent is everything, right?
Yes.
And the minute you realize that, hey, my contribution in this role, if I head this particular unit, can be immense to the organization, I think that somewhere plays a subconscious role in people sticking on and staying on to the role.
That's true. That's true, Swapnil. If you had asked me this 10, 12 years ago, I would probably say that 10, 12 years ago, IT services industry was at a point where we were primarily seen as a cost arbitrage center. We used to get projects, especially in services. Now we are at a point in time where that cost advantage has literally gone away. In fact, in some cases we are at a disadvantage because there are places where you get
Cheaper.
it's cheaper. So how do we sustain? The answer to that is developing expertise. So even in my current organization, we are at a very critical point where we are moving from being a safe pair of hands, a delivery center, or you can say a cost arbitrage center, to being a delivery expertise center. So which means that we need to have experts at skills that keep the business running today and the skills of the future. And that's where my role becomes very critical. And the experience that I bring, I think two things work really to my advantage. One, I speak the language of business, and that's what makes the difference. I understand what they actually need, and sometimes they themselves don't know what they need, and I'm able to articulate it better and understand better and then deliver it. The second thing is, I'm very conscious, and I very consciously run talent development like a delivery project. So it's not something that is good to have or desirable. It's run like a project. I get requirements, I have to execute them, I have to see what is the advantage that was delivered to the business. Has it worked? Has it not? And over the course of time, I also have to build those relationships where I understand what is it that business needs, what is it that the future holds. I have to work very closely with our CTO because he's the one who's designing the strategy for the future. So I understand that my role is very critical, very important, in the sense that it is directly linked to where my company wants to be. And that is something that motivates me a lot as well. And that's something that I take from my technical background and add value to as well.
So interesting, Aparna. So, even when we were at some point, I don't know when that transition has happened, but even when we were a cost arbitrage center of some sort, you still needed the skills to be a cost arbitrage center, right? And I think a lot of our the Infosys, the TCS, Wipro, a lot of these companies really, opened the door and showed so many other IT/technical companies the importance of setting up very strong learning and development practices, right? This practice has always been in the US and the Western markets, right? GE was known for having possibly the best business and engineering school in the world, maybe so many others. But I think the IT services industry here largely showed us that, listen, even if you're a cost arbitrage center, let alone a value add center, you need to take learning and development really, really seriously, because all said and done, there's always going to be a gap between, people coming out of college and what companies actually need, right? That gap, however much you try to narrow it, is always going to be there.
Yeah, I call it the gap between strategy and reality, to be very honest. And my job as a learning and development lead is to bridge that gap. The strategy is what the company wants, where it wants to be, the profits that it wants to generate, because at the end of the day, we are running a business, we have to make money. And the reality is where your talent or where your skills really are. So the lesser the difference between the two, the better the prospects for the company are going to be. So if somebody asks me to define my role, I very clearly tell them, with respect to skills, my role is lessening the distance between the strategy and the reality of your organization.
Aparna,
So yeah.
I have to tell you this little secret on air, but nobody from a purebred HR background would ever utter those words. Because they would say everything else, but they would actually utter those words of saying, listen, my job is to actually reduce the gap between strategy and the real world, or
Yeah,
execution
because
in some way.
that's the truth, Swapnil. That's what I see, because I work very closely with the PMG. PMG is our resource management group, the group, we call it the people management group, that allocates people. And I see the struggle that they have. They have people on bench, but those people are not the ones that have the skills to pick up new projects. So that continuous upskilling and being two steps ahead, but at the same time also running legacy, because that's today, and also digital, AI, next gen, because that's the future. And then upskilling people, reskilling people. So everything is coming together right now, and how do you make sense of it? So yeah, that's
Also, if I must give us credit, pat our own backs in some way, right? I think, I think there is no job which is, in my mind, more important than teaching and learning, right? And I'm not just giving credit to us as a learning and development team. I mean school teachers, I mean nursery teachers, I mean college teachers, I mean everything, right? Because I think the difference between us as a species, as against the other species that are around, is our ability to, from generation to generation, to pass on our teachings and learnings, right? I think that is what differentiates us from every other species. And that role is so critical at every level, right? Where, often when you talk to people, and you do a deep dive, they'll tell you, the person that influenced me most was my fifth standard teacher, or my 11th
yes.
standard teacher, or and that has such a huge impact on people's life. And so is the work we do in some way, right? Because so many people stepping out of, look at you, your own example, right? You were in one profession, but because of a course that you did, you're going into your new role with so much more confidence because of one course that you
That's
did,
true. That's
right?
true. That's true.
And I think you're skilling people and doing a great service, I think, of course, to the person, to the company that you work for, but also it's a nation building in a big way.
And it's also very for example, I'll give you a quick example. My son is 6. He's
Mm,
in form 1, grade
mm,
1.
yeah.
And there was an event in his school today, a 1-hour
Mm,
event, which was
mm,
called Cardboard Play Day. And that's why I'm
mm,
very casually dressed today, because I had to
yeah,
go there and work with cardboards.
yeah.
So, and the child, one parent had to come to the school, and they
Mm,
would sit with the kid. They were given
mm,
cardboards and
mm,
paints and tapes, and they had to build something.
mm,
And I saw amazing creativity in 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds.
mm,
People were making castles. They were making, one child made a dice, and then
mm.
he wore it.
Fantastic.
Cars. There was one child who made a cart. I and my son barely managed to make a house, but when
Yeah.
we finished it, my son tells me, "Mom, Mama, this looks like our dream house."
Wow.
And the methods of what I'm trying to say is, I would never have imagined something like this when we were in school, because it was
Yeah.
very books and all that, which
Mm,
worked at that time. But the times
yeah.
have also changed, and you need to
Yeah.
evolve.
Yeah.
And the focus now is so much on different methods,
Yeah.
building creativity, fostering innovation,
Yeah.
and it has started from schools. So the generation that is also coming into the workforce, their
Yeah.
expectations are also very different. So
Yeah.
the way we were trained as freshers is not
Yeah.
what the graduate of today is expecting. Engagement
Yeah.
is important, life purpose is important. How
Mm,
you weave their life skills into the skills that they need to do for their job is important. And
mm.
I also believe that we also need to speak their language.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I remember when we started working, we would call everybody sir and ma'am, and we were still
Mm,
like, that, like you said, guru and shishya.
yeah.
Kids today, the graduates who come into the workforce, they're very different. Their
Yeah.
expectations are, they're ready to give more also, but
Yeah.
their expectations are also different. So in
Yeah.
my company, we have people who are fresh graduates, 22-year-olds, right up to the senior most, which is like 55, 56, and we have to cater to the
Yeah.
entire
Yeah.
workforce. So different methods, different methodologies, gamification, events. We do learning events. June is our learning month. So constantly thinking of different ways to engage them, and also fostering life skills, because
Mm,
in a way those contribute to how you work,
mm,
how your mindset changes.
mm.
So I think apart from being critical, it's also a role that keeps me on my toes all the time. That what is it? How do I do it differently now? And that's also my leadership's expectation. When I go to my boss with a proposal, this is what I want to do, or we have this event and we would like to do it. The first question she asks me is, okay, how are you going to do it differently than what you did it last time?
Yeah.
So I think that's also the beauty of this role, because you get to innovate, experiment. It's not like, doing the same. It's not like testing, or no offense to people who do it. But the reason why I stayed and I'm still enjoying it
Yeah.
after 10, 11 years is also because, you get to do something new every day, and that
Yeah.
really fuels you as a professional.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very right brain plus left brain activity in some way, right? Because you need to treat it like you said, like any project, like you would otherwise.
Yes.
You have an external client there. You have a very solid internal client here that you always need to deal with. But there are also aspects of creativity that are involved in this particular role, and the creativity stems from the fact that you're not working on machines but working on people,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
that's a whole different dynamic of working on machines versus working on people, right?
That's
Which is
true.
such a
That's
fine difference if you think of it, right? Earlier you'd work with machines primarily, now you're working with people primarily.
Yes, and
And
it was so easy to work with machines because you
yeah,
know how a machine is going to react. You
yeah,
know what the machine expects as an input, and
yeah,
you're very
yeah,
clear what output you are going to get.
yeah,
But with people, you never know. I feel
yeah,
you never know with people. So
yeah.
you always, something that works for one will not work for the other, and the kind of, expectations that people have, you always have to keep thinking and going one step beyond what's happening in the industry. I remember when I moved to HR in 2014. I think 2014 and 2015, I attended every external session, webinar, conference possible. Paid,
Nice.
unpaid, invited, uninvited, because I so wanted to know what's happening in this
Mm,
space. And then
mm,
you kind of think, okay, this will work for my organization, this won't. And then you
mm,
test it, something fails miserably, but something really works, and that's how you build on it.
very interesting. One of the things, Aparna, that really helped me in my life is this quote that said, every human mind is as different as every human face, right? Which is
So
such an
true.
interesting thought, right? Every human mind is as interesting as every human face, and it's such a short line, but it's got so much of wisdom packed into it. Because the wisdom is to say that every face has largely two eyes, a nose, and a mouth, and two
Mm,
ears, right? So there's lots of things about human beings that are very common. right?
Yes.
But yet every human face is different, right?
Different.
So dealing with the similarities along with dealing with the differences of people is both the beauty and bane of our jobs, right?
Jobs. That's true. That's
You
true.
know, I started my career as a facilitator, and there would be, you know, 25 say people in a classroom, and it was literally 25 people with 25 different expectations, 25 different
Mm.
knowledge levels, 25 different emergencies and problems that they've dealt with before coming into the classroom, right? And you need to, in a way, reconcile all of those things and somehow do a productive learning session and at least get good feedback at the end of that, right?
That's true. That's true. I
Yeah,
sometimes do
yeah,
sessions,
yeah,
small sessions for HR teams or for the
yeah,
DU that I work. And I set this expectation at the very beginning. I tell them that I'm not the trainer because then the
yeah.
expectation is very. I tell them
Mm,
I'm just a moderator. I'm just
mm,
moderating this session
mm,
because I want them to be very clear with their expectations of how this session is going to go out. So
mm,
I tell them that I'm going to moderate the conversation, I'm going to manage the time, I'm going to make sure that all of you are engaged. But I might not have all the answers. I'm not a subject matter expert. That is a trainer. So I know how difficult your life
correct.
is.
Unfortunately, we can't say the same thing.
Yes, yes.
I would have loved to have all the lines that you said, but
Yes.
somehow we couldn't. But yeah,
Ye-
it's so interesting though, right? So
Yeah.
you know, very often when say a lot of clients say, you know, we don't really look at feedback. I'm like, yeah, you don't look at it when it's good. You definitely look at it when it's bad. So when it's good, you want to give it no credit and say, nee, nee, hame na business outcome chahiye. But I'm like, listen, you know, just ensuring that you deliver some kind of impact, even in that classroom, is such a tough task, and it's getting
Yes,
increasingly tougher,
yes.
right? In this day and age, and I think that's a very important. You know, I also, and we're never going to get enough time to talk about this, right? So, um, uh, you know, the constant desire to keep doing something new also can backfire, right?
Mm,
In my opinion, because there are some best practices in learning, right,
mm,
which are very important to do repeatedly, right?
mm,
Because I often tell people that there is, you know, in any kind of learning program, engaging your audience is very important, but also to make clear that we're not in the business of entertainment,
mm,
but we're in the business of learning, right? So that key
mm.
switch needs to be made over by any learner, that this is not Netflix, and this is you know, a learning session, right? So I'm sorry, I'm just blabbering on this a little more, but I was a panelist on a CII session a few days back, and one of my co-panelists said something very interesting. He said, you know, Netflix is a lean back experience, and any learning is a lean front experience,
Experience.
right?
That's true.
And I thought that was such an insightful thing to say, right? Because of course you want to engage the learner, because if the learner is not engaged, he's not going to learn. But we
Mm,
cannot start mistaking learning for entertainment, right? Because there is a
mm,
difference between the two. In any kind of learning intervention, there is going to be effort that is required from the learner, right? And you know, I think, and I want you to chime in on this, Aparna, and tell me what your view is. However, I see a lot of learning and development people, professionals, are totally held hostage by every little piece of feedback that comes from a learner, and they think that just taking that every piece of feedback that comes is the right way to operate. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Look at overall feedback, right? Because everybody is going to have a opinion on something, right? You need to really
mhm,
analyze that opinion and see whether the opinion of one, I,
mm,
you know, one person out of 30 said something, but I say, but 29 didn't say that same
mm.
thing, right? 29 people didn't. And if you know anything about probability and statistics, you will be able to make that difference and really evaluate that one view quite differently. So chime in on that. Do you think it makes sense, or do you think I'm,
It does, Swapnil,
yeah,
but I also think that it has to start with a very clear and well-defined objective. And
yeah,
that is where you need to spend a lot of time.
yeah,
Sometimes people come to me and say, the team doesn't gel, so let's do a
mm,
team building for them.
mm, mm, mm,
So I
mm,
said, okay, putting them in a room and,
mm,
get them to play games. And I asked them, I said, they will play that game, but once
mm,
they are outside that room, they will go back to being ungelled again. So probably diagnose a little bit more, go a little deep into what the problem is. Many people come back to me and say, "Oh, my team needs a communication training because they don't talk to clients." When we diagnose, we see that people have fairly good communication, but the problem is that they're talking to French or German people, and the challenge is in cross-cultural communication, not communication as such. So if your objective of what you're trying to achieve is very clear, then probably the execution becomes a little more sorted. And I clearly agree, you have to look at feedback very rationally, because like you said, different people come with different expectations. Some people also come with the mindset of evaluating the trainer. What is it that he or she is going to tell me that I don't know already? So with some people, the challenge is not learning, the challenge is unlearning. So you probably have to first get them into that mindset that, okay, there is something that is for you from this. So I try and spend a lot of time on diagnosis. And I also tell the trainer very clearly that please spell out the objectives and what we are going to achieve in this 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours very clearly at the beginning, and share it with participants so that their expectations are also in line, because sometimes they'll come back and say, "Oh, I thought this is going to be a session for this, but it turned out to be this." So typical project management principles, as I may call it. But also, having said that, sometimes even after doing all this, some things will still fail. I remember we did a session with a trainer for our N-1 leadership. This was when I had just started. I mean, I think 6 months into my role, and it was horrible. It just didn't go well. And what I realized was that the trainer wasn't a practitioner; he was an academician. And people who were in the training were all practitioners. They were looking for examples, they were looking for hows, and the trainer was focused on models and theories and what. So there was a big mismatch there. So the good thing is that I got this learning early on in my career. So I became a little more mindful of it going forward. But yeah, sometimes you also, as an L&D lead or probably a leader of any function, sometimes you also need to have a little bit of thick skin and say, okay, fine, I heard you, but I'm going to focus on this and I'm going to take it this way. But yeah, not very often. It doesn't have to be my way or the highway. But I think after some time in the function, you get that sixth sense of who's coming to it with a constructive feedback and who's just saying it because they want to tear it down. And then you take a pick and keep going forward with that.
It's so interesting, right? That this is my opinion. Again, I want you to chime in on that, right? That I think with most organizations, we try to train people in too many things. Number one. Number two, we keep looking for current buzzwords in which we need to train people. However, what all of us need to move towards, if you ask me, are what I call more foundational skills or meta skills, right? And go really deep into those meta skills till the extent where somebody gets bored of them, right? Which is a very, are you getting it? So since you mentioned communication skills, right? Communication skills, I'm just taking as a very wide topic because so many things involved in that, right? So with most services companies, all your work, not just services company, any work, all your work always happens through communication, right?
Right.
So that skill has got so many degrees, right, of getting better. And I think everyone should be trained on that subject all the time to the point of boredom, literally, right? Arey yaar, malum hai, but we are not doing that, right? We take 100 topics and we try to do 100 different topics, and the meta skills is where we don't focus on enough, right? Which I always find as a bit of a problem. And when I keep thinking of, if I were on the other side, how would I run stuff, right? And I'd always think that I'd run stuff focusing around the meta skills and not like 100 different topics. So
Yeah,
you tell me
I
what.
agree. And I think why people take 100 competencies or 100 topics is because somewhere it is deep ingrained, and I see this in many people in the L&D space, that training is to change people. I have to change the behavior of this person, especially in leadership development. I see, I have to change the way this person works. I think fundamentally we have to, at least in behavioral skills and leadership, you have to understand that it takes a lot of and continuous effort to change a person or personality. And 1 or 2 trainings or 1 to 2 years of interventions is not going to do that. So I am very clear in my company, the focus of leadership development is not to change people. It is only to make them aware, to make them aware of their behaviors and to make them aware of their derailers. If they can manage these two things at workplace, I'll be the most happiest person. And as an L&D lead, my objective is in a way fulfilled. Now for technical, like you said, you have to keep doing things to death. That is where in technical, you need to keep reiterating, because hands-on, new technologies, better way of doing things, you can say resource efficiency, all these things are that you have to keep doing day in and day out. So the focus there has to be on things that you want to learn, and then keep doing it over and over again, and keep doing it with your hands. Get your hands dirty and not just learn the topics. So I agree. I mean, leadership, the Lominger's model has, I think, 60 plus competencies for leadership. If we start training people on all of that, then it's like a 20-year project. So pick the 5 that make sense to your organization, your context, and then create a framework around it. So we have to be selective, otherwise we'll reach nowhere.
So just a couple of points. You shared such interesting stuff, right? The very nice quote that says you can't push a person up the ladder unless they want to climb, right?
Yes.
You can't teach anyone anything unless they want to
They
learn,
want to learn,
right?
yes.
So while even on both sides of the spectrum that you spoke about, I think leadership development and the soft skills is also awareness, very, very important. But I also think it's about exposing them to ideas, right? I think it's as simple as that, exposing them to different ideas, because they're not academics. They're not really going to get the time to sit and possibly read a book on leadership, or you get what I'm trying to say. We're trying to summarize the learnings from all of those things and expose our leaders to those particular ideas. That's the role that you're playing, right, of doing that, because they may not have the time to go through a huge book or a long lecture, and that's our job more often than not, right, to expose people to those ideas and often reiterate those ideas again and again. My belief is, whether it's behavioral or whether it's the technical side, right?
Yes.
The very, very nice thought that says, you're a good leader when your team can imitate you. Right? And what
Good
that
one.
essentially means, what that essentially means is that what it used to happen with our parents as well, right? You could literally predict what your parent would say in a certain situation, right? That's when you know that it's ingrained in your head, that particular behavior or that
Yes,
learning or that way
yes.
of looking at stuff. See, bolne wala hai, he'll say this, right? So take that often as a compliment when your team is imitating.
That's true. That's true. Somebody told me, that you're a good leader, good manager if your team misses you when you're not there, but nothing gets stuck because you're not there. So, yeah, but this one is better. I'm going to use this one next time.
Yeah. So tell me, what are the big changes that you're seeing in learning and development over, say, the last 5 years? Or if you want to take this question as a pre and post COVID, what are the changes that you're seeing in L&D, right? So last 5 years or pre or post COVID? I just want to know the latest, and if you could share 2 or 3 things that come to your mind.
Yeah, I think COVID has pushed all of us into the digital space a little faster. Pre-COVID, especially for soft skills, we didn't do any sessions that were online. So I think that was also a necessity because there was no other way. But then what it did was that it opened a lot of doors for us because we were able to do that digital learning during COVID for India. We got this opportunity to do it internationally.
Yeah.
And now we are doing at least 80 sessions a month for international, of course, English speaking audience.
Yeah.
So that has been a big shift.
Yeah.
Training has become more or less like a build project for us now because we track the KPIs, the effort spent accordingly. So it ushered us into the digital training age, and it opened a lot of doors for us. The second thing that happened a lot faster after COVID was that people got onboarded into learning platforms a lot faster than what we were trying. So between 2018, when we implemented our LMS, to 2020, 2 years, we were trying to onboard people, trying to have them do technical training, soft skills trainings online. And between 2020 and 2021, the entire organization was learning from technical platforms. In fact, they were asking for, and that is when we had to take enterprise contracts with some learning vendors.
Yeah.
So that is a big change. And earlier, I read that 12% or even lesser is the completion rate for MOOCs, as we used to call them earlier, and self-paced learning. That has increased a lot. In fact, right now, 35 to 40% of our learning hours are all online, all digital. All certification providers have moved to online, so people are doing them a lot faster. Otherwise, people had to wait for weekends, make time to go to a prometric center, as they used to call it. That has accelerated a lot. So that is, I think, with the way people are learning, that has been a big change. I think the second change which I see, especially at the leadership development level, because so many changes happened with respect to how leaders were managing people, how business dynamics changed. There were some tough decisions that had to be taken to conserve business. And then 2021, the recruitment craziness that happened, you know, uh, so a lot of big changes happening over a period of 2, 3 years. So I think the leadership has also our leadership competencies have changed. Managerial courage is one of our leadership competency, and we do learning and training on that. So leadership has become more open, more accepting of learning. We've introduced team coaching, group coaching, individual coaching, all after 2021, and it's going really well. People are asking for more effort to be spent on it. Every year we do these. We have onboarded an online coaching platform now because the demand was so high, and in person individual coaching with the coaches onboarded was getting a little difficult. We've launched high potential program, a digital high potential program, which we didn't even think of pre-COVID. We thought everything like this has to happen within a closed room. So these things, these new initiatives with the help of technology, digital enablement has really become, has become BAU now, to be very honest. So these are the few changes that we
That's
saw.
very interesting. I think, at least from my vantage point, I think a lot of what you're saying is been reiterated by a lot of your colleagues across the board, right? I think the overall adoption of digital,
Yeah.
whether it's virtual, live, or
Hmm.
self-paced, right? Both the examples that you gave opened up doors for both of these to be taken up by people far more.
Yeah.
And an additional trend that I'm seeing, that I've been discussing with everybody, is also in a way the comeback of live in physical classroom trainings as well. Because I don't know whether you're seeing a demand for it, but a lot of times when we're going to our customer, they're saying, no, 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 we want to do something in a physical classroom, right? There is a little bit of a digital fatigue which is taking place, which I think is now balancing stuff between stuff
Yes.
happening physically in classroom, virtual, live, and
Hmm.
self-paced, right? So the right combination of these three, and then you have your elements like you mentioned of the coaching and
Yes.
mentoring that is coming in between. So I think now they're somehow finding their own balance in some way.
Yeah, but no learning journey is, at least in my experience, is just
Mm,
one mode anymore. So
yes.
every learning journey has a in-person
Multimodal.
part,
Yeah.
has a self-paced part, has a blended part.
Yeah.
So it is also giving a very varied experience to the learner. So,
Yeah.
and everything happens in one learning journey. For
Yeah.
example, the high potential program that I mentioned, it's
Yeah.
a combination. So you
Yeah.
have 1 2 day workshop, then
Yeah.
you have 3 half-day online classes,
Yeah.
then you get a small case study to work on, and then you
Mm.
again meet for 2 days.
Yeah.
Then the same cycle repeats, then you have the last 2 days, and that's how you wrap it up within a year.
Correct.
So
Correct.
everything is a combination now going
Yeah,
forward.
yeah. Which is just, I think, opened up a lot of learning avenues for people. Which is, the learner is benefiting from all these multimodal ways through which learning is happening. And I also think it gives the learning and development, or the capability building team, to use different tools at your disposal to meet your
Yes,
objectives, right?
yes,
So
that's
I
right.
think,
Different tools, different methodologies. We
yeah,
put a lot of pressure on external providers,
yeah,
trainers,
yeah,
because we also want to see how do they bring it all together. And as an organization, I would definitely prefer to go with somebody who gives me an end-to-end solution, and I don't
yeah,
have to work with multiple vendors and all that. But
yeah.
I think the offerings are also getting structured that way now.
Yeah. You can just work with us. Don't worry.
Yes, I heard
I
that.
had to. Usually, I don't plug us anywhere if you watch any of our CXO shows. But this was like, if you follow cricket, you gave me like a full toss ball, and if you give me a full toss ball, it'll be criminal for me not to hit it for a four.
Yes, yes, yes. No, no, that's. We
Yeah,
are continuously looking for partners and vendors,
yeah,
because we also need to create programs, look at what the market has to offer, what are the capabilities, and
yeah,
sometimes, like I said, people also need new trainers, new things.
yeah.
So that ways it works really well.
I'll just share something very interesting with you, right? So, just on this multimodal, often a journey based stuff, we've had a lot of our clients um, rope in different vendors for different pieces of that journey too, depending on what their strengths are, right? They know that they have some, internal self-paced capabilities on their LMS, some courses there. So, as a part
Right.
of that overall journey, sometimes they say, hey, y'all are really good at this, to do this part, the self-paced part, I'll pull
Mm,
from my existing LMS and then do the last part for me again, because I will help stitch the whole thing together as the
together.
capability building stuff. So yeah, often with one partner, but just the amount of ways in which I think people can be skilled today has changed, like you said, right? Thanks to digital coming, and that being
Yes.
expedited by the tragic phenomena of COVID,
Yeah.
right? What keeps you up at night? As what are the two or three things that is stopping you from sleeping? And I don't mean
As
in your existing role. I mean, just speak from a broader lens of a L&D person, L&D head today. What keeps an L&D person up at night?
So I think the big question that I keep asking myself, and that could also be because stemming from the kind of person that I am,
Mm,
the question that I keep asking myself is what next?
mm,
And I firmly believe that I might not have the answer today, but I will eventually find out.
mm.
So that's
So, but
why
but elaborate a little more on what do you mean by what next
so
from
what
what
next
what
is
point?
with respect to, I am very well connected with the direction that the company is going. I have my regular connects with the PMG, with the CTO. Of course, we have a very good governance in place where my leader shares a lot of inputs about what the company, whether it is the financial situation, whether it is what the focus, for example, for us right now for the next 2 years, it is going to be Gen AI. So, what is it that the company imperatives are, and how, in my role, can I contribute to it?
Mm,
Keeping in mind what our current reality is.
mm, mm,
So, finding answers in whatever bits and pieces I can to this larger question is what I mean by what next, what more can we do. For example, this like I gave you an example early on this bench situation. We have people on bench, but we don't have people to fulfill the requirements that we have, because the technology stack is very different.
Correct.
And you can't do a very long upskilling program just in time, because you
Correct.
need people, and then it takes. So what can we do to preempt that? So do we
Yeah.
need a better connect to see the future pipeline, and then keep these upskilling programs running all the time?
Correct.
Can we better manage the bench?
Mm.
So looking at some of the existing problems and how we can have a more sustainable solution to it, that's
Mm.
one part. That is the current. And what
Mm.
does the future look like for Sopra Steria?
Mm.
And then probably seeing how we can contribute to solving it. Of
Mm.
course, every delivery unit, every business unit also has some challenges of its own, with respect to people, talent, leadership, managerial. So those also become small projects which people in my team pick up, like a sudden ramp up, a sudden ramp down. So upskilling, reskilling. So these are the things that I keep. And other than that, I am a lot into digital creativity. So if there is any digital tool, I am a very bad painter. I can't draw a straight line to save my life, but I really like experimenting with digital tools. So I
Mm.
love to create small video nuggets, some small training, bite-sized learning, but that's more out of my interest.
Got it.
And so that is something that I look for new tools that are available in the market, whether it is training or otherwise. But
Got it.
that's another thing that is of great interest to me.
Got it. All the things that you spoke about earlier, I just thinking in my mind, they're all business as usual, right? I think you get what I'm trying to say. All the challenges that you spoke about is what every business has to go through. They may be
Yes.
called different things, but they're everyday hardcore execution challenges.
That's true. That's true. And that's what
Yeah,
keeps you relevant,
yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah,
know what's, because it's not HR for HR. And
yeah,
my leader says that to us repeatedly. We are not HR for HR. We are HR for business.
yeah,
So, if Gen AI is what the company has to focus on in the next 2 years,
mm,
even before delivery teams, HR should be a little bit upskilled and
yeah,
reskilled on, at least to understand what Gen AI is all about and what does it bring to business.
yeah, yeah.
So that's one way that we have to probably match
Yeah.
steps with them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, I often smile because, every problem that my team internally brings to me, I often have a smile on my face because I'm like, hey, this is the same problem that you think is very unique, is a problem that every organization across the board, across different sectors would have the exact same challenge, right?
Challenge, yeah.
That you do. It's just probably worded in a slightly more different way, but the challenges
It's
of
it's
running.
like the example you gave.
Yeah,
Everybody has the same set of eyes, nose,
yeah, yeah,
mouth,
yeah.
but still everybody looks very different. Every
Correct,
human looks very different. So
correct,
it's the
correct,
same with companies as well.
correct.
Same problems, but they stare at you
Yeah,
differently.
yeah, yeah. So, when I used to facilitate, right, actively at one point of time, one of my biggest learnings was, um, I thought IT services company would be very different from manufacturing, would be very different from a bank, would be very different from insurance, right? So I would often go into kind of learning sessions when I first started thinking it's going to be different. And my biggest realization was the commonality and the similarity between all of these things, which again went down to what I call the meta skills or the foundational skills that are required, right?
Mm,
If you're talking about leading teams, right? I think the more or less the broad principles of how you lead teams have been more or less evergreen, right?
mm,
And they literally work across different hierarchies and different industries. Now, one industry could be slightly, one aspect of it could be slightly more than the other. And I have to admit to you, very often, I would not say this to my clients because then they would think that I am anti customization, right? And so I just keep quiet. But I knew that once entered as into a classroom as a facilitator, it's the same thing, right? And people need to do more or less use the same tools. competencies, capabilities to do their job well, right? So yeah, like you
Yeah.
said, business as usual is what should keep all of us up at night, right?
Yeah,
Nothing
and if
really
you can
different.
manage that well, then only you can
Yeah,
think of business as unusual. Because if
yeah,
you
yeah,
don't run your current business well,
yeah, yeah,
how are
yeah.
you going to think of the future?
Yeah, yeah. So it's so we can keep talking. I think I know we're running out of time, but I'll just share this thing with you, right? So you know, you often tend to do the same programs year on year, right? And very often teams, yeah, and I'm sure you were the same when you were on the business side. You'll say, "Arey, kya fayda hua iska? Last year to yahi kiya tha." But I'm like, hey, what has happened from last year to this year is 20% of your team is gone, like 5 processes have changed, right? You get what I'm trying to say, right? The expectation has gone up from where it probably was of that particular business, so on and so forth. So in the end, teamwork is still going to be a problem, even if you did a session last year and this year, right? You're doing the session year on year to keep stuff together. And the very fact that it's not falling apart at its seams is often because you do all these things which more or less are keeping the boat floating in some way.
Floating. And yeah, sometimes people don't realize it, but I have been very fortunate in my current company.
Yeah,
Our deputy CEO is our biggest ambassador
very
and
nice.
champion. We call him our learning champion.
Very
And
nice.
while everybody sometimes asks what is the ROI on this, and sometimes my training vendors and partners come back with a presentation which has an ROI calculation.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells us that, don't focus on ROI, just
Mm-hmm.
because these things, behavioral things, take a long time. And what you do will reflect into the culture of the company, the behaviors of the people. You
Yeah.
don't have to show me a fancy graph to tell me, oh, this is the investment and the return. Because if I am connected to my people and my company, I will see what impact it is making. And
Yeah.
that is so reassuring, because then we are not just doing a program, or we are not just running a training. We're actually working for something much bigger and at an organization level. So that is really helpful and reassuring. And also it gives you that courage to, keep doing the same things over and over again, but also introduce deltas within.
Very nice. Aparna, you told me that you had a hard stop at 4, so we're going to stick to your hard stop. But I think that was an apt note to end the conversation on, that if learning and development has to be successful within companies, it always requires champions at a senior
Yes.
level. I think it
Yes.
requires champions that are not fooled by some slides on ROI, right?
Yes.
That we know often don't hold weight, right? Again, anybody that knows probability can and
Yes.
statistics can pick holes through those models that are created. But it's more importantly knowing the importance of learning and development for us as both in our personal lives, the importance in our professional lives, and I think also knowing that in the knowledge economy, the competence of your people is going to determine the outcome of your company, right? I think
That's
that is a
very
very
true.
important part. So, Aparna, any closing note from you?
No, I think, like I said, at this point in time, it's a great place to be.
Mm,
It's an exciting time for me to be at the position that I am at.
mm.
I'm very conscious of what impact I and my function and my role makes to business. And it gives me a lot of pride and satisfaction.
Mm.
So, and I think as a professional, these two things are very important to me.
I think that's a very nice thing of you to say. Keep reminding you and your team of the big role that you all are playing in an individual's development, in your organization's development, and in our nations and the other nations that you're impacting in their development, right? Because it all counts in the end, right? It all
Yes.
counts in
Yes.
some way, and I think we're all in our small ways making contributions that help to a larger cause. And
Yes.
I'm very happy that you're happy and proud about the role that you're doing.
Yes. Yes, I am.
Cool.
Thank you
Okay.
so
Thank you
much.
very much. Thank you. I
Thank
enjoyed our
you.
conversation, and we'll do a part 2 because this seemed like it was too. I feel like we've just gotten started. I haven't even asked you any questions, right? And we're done with an ask. So
Yes.
let's schedule a part 2 at some point
Sure.
in the future.
Sure.
engage a little more.
Sure. Looking forward to it. And thanks, Swapnil. I
Me
enjoyed the
too.
conversation a lot.
Me too. Me too. Me too.
Thank
Thank you very
you.
much.
Bye-bye.